First, I want to introduce Chad Alexander to those of you that have not met him yet. Obviously, I've worked with Chad in Baltimore for 20 years, and a great friend, great resource for me, outstanding evaluator, someone I know inside and out as a person, as a man, as a leader. So fired up to get him here. He's been a big part of this process and a great resource to me. So just wanted to introduce him to you guys, and we can open it up to questions.
You obviously know JK Dobbins really well, being in Baltimore. What was it about him that made you want to get him here?
Oh, the kid, the player, the talent, the competitor. JK, I've had a chance to be with for 4 years, and special competitor. Wants to be here. He just signed up his deal about 2 hours ago. So excited, fired up. Feel the energy right away for him. A guy I think one of the benefits to sign in free agency, when you get to sign someone you know, what type of player they are, what type of person they are, how they're going to be in this culture we're setting up here, how they're a fit. It's a great when you have an opportunity to do something like that. So we're just really excited to get him here.
Is there any this history, the injuries he's had? Is there any kind of common denominator, or has it just been luck?
Bad luck, I was there for both injuries, low tackle and then an awkward tackle, but it's just bad luck. That's football, right? I mean, like, injuries are going to happen. It's part of the game. But he's in great shape now and recovering really well.
So there's nothing going forward that he could alter or anything.
No, I'm not a doctor, and there's probably limited things I can say, but obviously we feel good about where he is physically and really with all the players we've signed. But it's the game of football, so anyone can be hurt on any given day.
Are you expecting him to be ready for training camp? What's sort of the timeline as far as his recovery?
Yeah, he should be ready. I think we'll take our time with him like we do with every single player that's recovering from a season-ending injury and surgery. So obviously we're not playing until September, so we're not in a rush. I think we want to get guys healthy at their best before we crank them up and get them rolling.
And how much does the signing change the approach at running back for you guys heading into the draft?
I don't think it does. I think when you look at what the goal is to add depth, right, and add great players at every position. But you don't want to turn away from a good player because you signed someone. And I think if you look at the history that I've been a part of, we've done that. I think if you look back, we signed Marcus Williams in Baltimore, and then we turned around and took Kyle Hamilton in the same draft. And so I think it's important to if you get a chance to get great players, you take them, and you all you do is you create great depth, and that's a big. I've mentioned it before in the past here. That's a big issue, concern for us, is to really develop a deep, talented team at all positions across the board. So you don't turn away from a great player who can help you, even if you may be a little bit deeper at that position.
As you're 1 week away from your first draft in this role as the general manager, what's kind of surprised you the most out of this process the past couple months?
Probably the funniest thing is once I got the job, other GMs would ask me, "Hey, have you woken up at 3 a.m. just because?" Yeah, like your mind is spinning and you just can't go back to sleep. And I'm like, no, that hasn't happened yet. And then once we probably left the combine, it just does. I mean, you don't sleep as much as you did in the past because something pops in your head and you start thinking it, early in the morning and you're rolling. But that's one. I'd say the process itself has been great. I've enjoyed everyone's involvement, coaches, scouts. I think everyone's done a great job. So it feels a lot like it's been in the past for me. And I think everyone in the building and the organization has done a great job participating in it.
What's your approach on, when you get to your position in the draft, best player available versus biggest need? Where do you value what's more important?
Yeah, I think it's best player available. I think we want to, like I said, we want to add depth, and certainly there's some positions that we don't need, quote unquote need in quotations, but you're one, like I said, you're one play away from needing a position. So if you look at it based on need, you're never one player away, ever. And I've learned that from my predecessors, Ozzie Newsome and Eric DeCosta, and I believe that. And so you get a chance to add a great player, you add them. And so that's how we're going to approach it.
Chad, for you, what was attractive about this opportunity?
There's a lot. I mean, I was in Baltimore for 20 years, worked with Joe for 20 years, so obviously developed a great relationship with him. And, it was tough for me to leave Baltimore initially and ended up with the Jets. It really took a special situation, a special person like Joe Douglas for me to leave the Ravens. I was extremely comfortable there, won a couple championships, and I had a lot of success and left a lot of great friends behind. And I think the same situation applies itself here, just to come to a first-class organization like the Chargers, amazing opportunity for myself, to come with a guy like Joe, extremely dedicated to what he does. He's great at what he does. He's a great evaluator. He's a great human being, and someone that's just easy to follow. So, it wasn't necessarily an easy decision, but I knew it was the right decision based on Joe and my relationship with him, and also an opportunity to come to a great, iconic city like Los Angeles and be with a great coach like Jim Harbaugh, and we have a quarterback. So, I mean, it's there's a lot of positives. I'm extremely excited to be here.
Joe, do you think at draft night, will you feel any extra pressure, or do you have any sense of how that, just given the fact this is the first time that you'll be kind of in the driver's seat?
I think I'll be excited. I think there'll be some anxiety, but pressure. I think there's pressure in every draft, and I've felt it before. But if you have everything prepared, and that's everything. That's your list. That's your trade scenarios. You've talked through them, which we've been doing. Obviously, Chad and I, you guys don't know this, we live together, along with Corey, who I brought over. So we're talking about things at the office, at home. Get Jim involved. I have John, the scouts, Ed. We're constantly talking through many different scenario situations. So you kind of get the game plan out, and then I don't think the pressure should be there. I don't think I'll feel pressure because we'll have the plan set and what we're going to do if this happens, if that happens. And, if something happens that we don't anticipate, which I'd be surprised if it does, you adjust and you think quick and you move and you react and you make the decisions. So I don't think I'll feel pressure. I think I'll feel excitement and anxiety because it's the first time.
You mentioned that
together?
I'm sorry?
You guys are living together?
Yeah, Chad and I. That's a true story.
How did that happen? How did that happen?
Well, because I rented a place in Huntington Beach. My family is still in Baltimore. His family is still in New York or Jersey. Yeah. And Corey doesn't have a family. So I got a place big enough that can house my family if they ever come out here, which hasn't been enough if they're listening. But I told them they can stay with me, if my family's not here. So, we're down in Huntington, It's been great. It's been great. We're never there. We're here all the time. So, but it's been great, It's good to have friends. Carpool, yep. There was a time where I had the car. They didn't have one. They were riding with me. And now I don't have a car, so I'm riding with them. It's great. There's 2 cars in the house.
One more question. Who does the grocery shopping?
None of us. We're not very good at that. We're getting off tangent here, but that's okay. Corey and I, we had a little master's watching party for the personnel department. So we go to the grocery store, and I've been in a grocery store, okay? Actually, my wife hates when I go to the grocery store because I take forever because I get lost in a grocery store. When I mean by lost, I'm just curious about stuff, and I buy all the impulse buys and all that. But if I take my kid, it's even worse. We come back with all the snacks and all that. But I'm in there with Corey, and I'm looking and finding things. He's like, "Where'd you find that?" I'm like, "You've never been to a grocery store." We were looking for Old Bay, which
they sell that?
In Maryland, it's on every aisle. Here, you have to go right to the fish area, seafood area. So I went to the seafood area, and so he was like, "Where'd you find it?" I was like, "You've never been in a grocery store very often, have you?" So, so our grocery shopping is not great. Sorry, long answer. I'm sorry. We were making crab. Corey makes a really good crab dip. So
the dip was good.
Yeah, it was really good.
The dip was good.
Yeah,
And Joe, you talked to us before earlier, I think, and you mentioned like the phones had started ringing yet.
Yeah.
Other teams, has that happened yet?
Yeah, and it will happen. It has happened. I've had communication, conversations. Nothing's concrete right now. We have the 5th pick. If we had the 1st pick of the draft, there'd probably be a lot of calls being made, and people would be making offers already. But we don't. We have the 5th pick in terms of where we're sitting. We believe, and I think Coach mentioned, we actually have the 1st pick if a run of quarterbacks go. So people all have called about interest in coming up to us. I've had conversations, but I think we'll have conversations through this week. I've had them already this week. We'll have them through the weekend, through next week, and then on draft day, that's when it'll really pick up.
Those combos at this point are just preliminary.
Yeah, would we be interested if our guy's there? That's the typical question, and so we talk through it, but no offers or no picks, But just tell them,
If you guys do trade down from 5, on a general level, not getting like these specifics, but on a general level, what would be the reasoning for you guys to move back?
we've gotten a nice result in picks and value. That's going to be the reason, because there's really good players, great players that we're going to be staring at. And so if we're going to trade away from great players, there's got to be a reason in terms of value for us. And certainly there's going to be more great players in the draft, but it's got to make sense to you, and it's got to make sense to the team that's wanting to come up.
So is there a benchmark for you, like a specific benchmark as far as return that you need to get in order to pass on one of these
Sure,
picks?
there's certainly, it's too good of a deal because of what you're getting back. Yeah, they have to make it attractive for us to move away from those players. The whole, it's a fair trade, it's a wash. I don't think that's a trade that we're interested in.
Is there a limit on how far you would want to move back? Because like you said, at 5, you get a blue chip person, but the further down you get, the further you get away.
Yeah, I would never cap us, and I don't think we should cap ourselves. But yeah, there's certainly you kind of create layers of, okay, this is about how far I'd want to go back, and then you got it. That's part of the strategy. If this, then this. So, yeah, I wouldn't cap us, but again, it's got to make sense to us too.
As far as the return, there's obviously a possibility of getting picks in this year's draft and future picks.
Sure.
You guys, from Jim to you, have all said that we're trying to build a winning roster every single year. How do you balance the return, whether it's 2024 picks or 2025 picks?
Yeah, that's the valuation you put on all the picks. I think we value every pick in the draft. We create a value for each pick, and you sit there and say, okay, is a future X round worth more than one in this round? But certainly we want to create some more picks, as many picks as we can this year. But yeah, you do look forward to, and if you get a chance to get a high round pick next year, sometimes that creates more value.
When you said the part about it being a fair trade or a wash, and you guys are looking for that, what did you mean by that?
So everyone has charts, and it's fair, meaning it equals out to a fair trade. And so when you're trading away from the number one player in the draft, I don't know if it's necessarily always going to be a fair trade, because you have a chance to pick the number one position player in the draft.
What's your next week going to look like, and when do you put like a final set on your board? Are you making changes up until the draft is starting, or do you say like by this day we aren't changing it, no last minute
Yeah, so I think you always look at the list and you're like, do I like this player or this player? And you may be looking at player 110 versus 111, and sometimes it's okay, they're two different positions, and which one has more value. I think what we're going to do, we've had great meetings with the coaches, like I mentioned. Board is pretty set. What we're doing now as an organization, coaching staff, scouting staff, myself, Chad, Jim, John, we're looking at clumps, and okay, let's sort these clumps. And but in terms of the levels of the board, they're set. It's really, you're kind of looking at these 3 guys, these 4 players. Who do we see as the best option if we're picking at that spot and the players are available? And a lot of times you sort that clump, and there's only one guy sitting there when you're picking, so you do, but it's so there's a little tweaking, but there's not vast movement in the lists and the boards right now.
You just mentioned trying to maximize your number of picks this year. Is that, can you explain the rationale there? I'm assuming it's just trying to build up the roster and given the restrictions, salary cap wise.
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah, that, and it's like baseball. The more at bats you get, the more chances you have hits, and so I'm a big baseball guy, and so if you hit 300 with 10 at bats versus 20 at bats, you get 6 more hits. If you hit 500, you get 5 more hits, so like, the more bats you get, the better. So, we want to hit them all, but we understand it's the draft, and there's times you may not get the same value you anticipate you're drafting.
In baseball, the bats are all equal in the draft. Picking 5 is different than picking
Sure.
11.
Sure, you're right. It's like going against an ace, but you still got a shot. So, and that's what you do the work for. That's why you pour in the resources, you pour in the interviews, the visits. Go to the pro days. Have coaches look at them, have additional people look at them, have the group look at them. That's you put the work in to try to get the 37th pick right, just as accurate as you get the 5th pick.
You talked about at draft or at combine how depth this, especially wide receiver draft classes. Now that you've had a chance to talk with some guys, go to pro days, see them, etc. What do you value? Like, how close in talent and skill level are some of these top receivers, or do you feel like there are specific ones that are drastically different?
Yeah, I think there's always, and it's wide outs. It's really all positions. I think you get clusters of players throughout the draft. I think offensive lines are really deep draft too this year, but there's a drop. There's guys that are grouped together, and then there's a drop, and then there's more grouped together. I think wide outs similar. Now, I think this league has proven you can find talent at any level, at any round, at all positions. So we stack them across the league, all 32 teams. We have our orders, and then a guy goes in the 5th round and sets a rookie receiving record. So, I think you look at where the drop-offs are, and you kind of anticipate where you think these players will go versus the next run on wide outs, on O-line, on corners, running backs, any position.
Sticking with wide receiver, just from a team building philosophy perspective, how important is that position to building a championship roster?
I think it's important. I do. I think wide outs, but I think I don't place an increased importance on any position other than obviously the quarterback position, which we're in good shape here. So, I think wideouts are important. I think running backs are important, and I think offensive line is important. Tight ends in this offense, tight ends are important. So, and certainly you got to get after the quarterback. How do you affect the quarterback? You get after him. So, I really think that's why we have always fallen back in Baltimore to the best player available, and that's what we're going to do here in LA. And we're going to take the best player available because every position is important to help win.
You kind of alluded to Puka Nacua in that 5th round. Like, with seeing some players who have been taken later rounds, like Brock Purdy too, has your evaluation process changed and been like, okay, are these guys that we're missing going in the late round, like why is that happening?
Well, I think you always look at that, like what did we miss on this player? What do we not give him enough credit for? And I think that happens every year. You're not doing your job collectively as a group, as an individual scout, without saying, what did we miss on this player? What do we overlook? So, and certainly, there's a lot of those stories throughout the history of the NFL. I mean, we have had a lot of success here with undrafted free agents who have been outstanding, all pro players, all Pro Bowl players. So the league, you overlook players for some specific reason, but what is it that sets him apart from his peers that may have had the same deficiencies? What is it that he has that helps him overcome those deficiencies? And that's how you learn.
Is there a common theme of these players that you
It
have?
It varies. I know this, competitors, guys that compete, guys that you can hang your hat on that they're going to come out and work every day and be out there and put it out there on the field. I think you look at the great success stories of late round and undrafted free agents, they all probably have that competitive gene. I do know that.
So you mentioned the depth in this year's draft in terms of receiver. Do you remember a draft previously that had the level of talent that this year's draft has? And then in terms of value, does it change because of how much receivers are making now versus maybe how much they made in years past?
Yeah, to finish on your last question first, certainly the position has increased in pay, and so you have to take that into consideration when you're valuing players. But in terms of depth, I've said it before, I'll say it again, I'll say it next year, and I'm going to say it 5 years from now. I can promise you, wide receiver is going to be a deep position in the draft every year. It's just the way the game has evolved and changed. It's a passing game, or it's certainly increased, throughout the past 20 years. So players are coming out more polished. If you think back, I'm 48 years old. 7-on-7 camps didn't exist. I don't know when they started, but those things they're going everywhere now. And so these players in high school are going through all these 7-on-7 camps. They're just developing their game, so they're much more polished and ready to play the NFL level when they have the skill set and get to this level.
You mentioned at Baltimore, you always select the best player available, or would like to. Lamar seemed like a prime example of that. But can you cite another example where, maybe need was one player, but you went a different direction?
Yeah, I think Kyle. I mentioned it earlier. Kyle. I mean, we drafted, or we signed Marcus in free agency that year and paid him, and then we turned around and took Kyle when no one thought we would. So we had Chuck Clark starting at the other safety. We had 2 starting safeties, and we just took the best player on the board.
As far as the corner room, what's the plan here as far as who's going to play nickel for you guys?
Yeah, we'll sort that out. That'll be up for the coaches to decide. That's kind of outside my realm, but certainly, all the players we have flexibility, the athleticism, the toughness to go in there. Jasir's played in there already, so but we have time to figure that out and sort it out. The guys will get reps at multiple spots. I'm sure of that.
And then just how does Derwin James factor into that situation to
Yeah.
play nickel?
Well, that's
Jesse said
yeah. So
February.
like if Derwin can play that big nickel, then that's again defense is evolving. You have different packages. You have a big nickel. You have a true nickel. So it depends on the package you're going against. But Derwin's played that here. And so already so. He's a guy that can go down there. His versatility is outstanding and awesome to have. So I think Jesse's a creative and great coach, and so he's gonna put the best players out there for us to succeed.
But with Derwin, it would be like as you're building the roster, it would be like a rotational thing for him, like he's done in the past, like big nickel package. It wouldn't be Derwin James is like a full-time slot player.
Full-time. No, Derwin is a full-time football player. He's going to play where he helps us best.
What has this process taught you about Jim?
Oh, just how passionate he is about the game and the whole process. I mean, he pours his heart and soul into everything, and he loves the game, and he loves the players. It's so much fun. I mean, if you could sit in there in our interviews at the Combine and watch him and connect with every single player, and not only in the moment, but to see the connection he's already developed with these players. And they all walked in the door. They knew him. Most of, all four. I think we interviewed 45 players. I don't know if all knew him. If they didn't, they certainly knew who he was. But then the connection is instantaneous, and the love he has for the game, the love he has for his team, his coaches, but just the passion, the drive. It's been awesome.
What's been the biggest advantage of him coming straight from college to now doing the draft? Is it the connection with the players? Is it he already has this knowledge of who might be good and who might be maybe overlooked? Or what's your?
It's both. I mean, he's watched other teams. He's played against the entire Big Ten plus. He knows his whole team. So he brings a wealth of knowledge about the players that are currently in college. He remembers when they were recruiting them. He knows what positions they played in high school. When we recruited, this guy was a defensive end. He ended up being a tight end. This player, so it's you do gain a lot of insight from not only Jim, the rest of the coaches that came from the college ranks.
Have you guys had any conversations on if he were to take maybe a rival, what that would be like?
Yeah, I don't think he'll hold that against. He's on board with us taking the best player regardless of what helmet they wear.
Have you invited him to the house, or he's sticking in the RV?
No, I think he's now, his family's in town, so he's, the RV is behind him now. Yeah, I would have given him mine, but he had the RV.
You guys, I think, have been connected to almost every Michigan player available.
Yeah.
How does that factor into it in terms of, I imagine Jim can sort of separate his allegiance, but at the same time, there is that natural thing that you could see him wanting these guys that he just got to.
Sure, absolutely. Why wouldn't you? I mean, they're national champs for a reason. They have a bunch of great players on that team. And so like I've said over, we put them through the process and we rank them and stack them, and the coaches evaluate them. You got to get them in the right spot, and certainly we know the players better than anyone, and that's a major advantage for us.
So when your pick comes up and there's indecision, there isn't consensus, do you have the last call?
I'm the one who picks the player, but when I tell you it's a collaborative process, it's a collaborative process. I put the list together based on what we do as a group, and that's scouting, that's coaching, and that's talking to Jim's input, his evaluation on the players. I'm the one who ranks them, and I'm ultimately the one that calls them, and that's the way it was where I came from. That's the way it's been here in LA with Dean and John, and that's the way we're continuing to operate. But it is a collaborative process.
Joe, with day 3 picks, do you guys value production, trades? What's the most success we've had, I guess, in the past when you were able to pick guys in day 3 that eventually make a roster?
It's probably a multitude of things, in all honesty. There's times where it's, hey, let's take this big, fast, athletic player who we've seen do it but may not have the consistency, or it could be a player, a defensive lineman that just knows how to two-gap and plays hard and plays tough, and he might not have sacks, but we know exactly what he's going to do. So I think those players get ranked, and stacked based on their traits versus their production, and that's what you have to weigh. That's Eric DeCosta has always said it's a little bit of art and a little bit of science. That's the balance of it, and so you gotta weigh those things and what you're valuing more in that moment, in that clump.
You guys have talked about the vision for the team at large, physicality, building through the trenches, running the football, protecting Justin Herbert. As far as offensive line, what's your assessment of what you guys currently have here in the building right now?
I'm excited about what they're going to do. I really am. I've watched this team from afar, and then I've had a chance to see them now in person. I've seen them out there, working out, out there on the field, out my window, and they're all here. They're all putting the time in. They're already getting bigger, stronger, and just they're committed and passionate. And so I'm excited about the group and the guys we've added. And again, we got the draft coming up. We got post-draft. We're not done. We won't be done adding to this team until September. We're gonna always continue to add. So at all positions, but the O-line specifically, there's a lot of talent in there, and I love the commitment and passion and the enthusiasm they have. And I believe in our coaching staff. I really do. I think they're great coaches. I've had an opportunity to work with a number of them on offense, and I really think our scheme and their coaching and the players themselves, I really expect them all to have a great year this year.
How important is this draft in terms of setting a tone for what you're looking at, what Jim's looking at, your vision for this team?
Yeah, I think it falls in terms of importance into the high level of importance, because but next year is going to be just as important. It really is, But we're going to take players that we deem to be Chargers, and that's the right mentality, that's the right work ethic, the toughness, the desire and love for the game, playmaking ability, all of those things that wrap into it. But I think this draft is important, but next year it's going to be the most important draft for this team in my mind. And the year after that is going to be the most important draft for this team.
Just going back to the offensive line, do you feel like you still need starting pieces up front?
I think we could go out and play football today. I do believe that, 100%. Again, best players, you just take them. And because what you do is you create great depth and you create great competition. And then the best players play, and if you have 5 starters and you draft someone or sign someone who's better than one of your 5 starters, you've just made your team a lot better. So because offensive line, those guys get hurt too, and so one goes down, you're in great standing.
And then obviously the trenches, there's 2 sides. So we talked a lot about offensive line, but on the defensive line, particularly on the interior, we know what you guys have at edge rusher, but on the interior, what type of player do you want to add to the interior? What are you looking for in an interior defensive line, considering the way the roster is structured?
Yeah, I think we have some versatility currently on the roster, what we have on the interior, and I think you can add either the two-gapper run stuffer, and then if you get a chance to add a pass rusher, a guy who's maybe more of that one gap penetrator, that helps us too. So I don't think you pigeonhole yourself into a specific type of player. You just say, hey, does the guy fit what we want to do, and do we like him? So it's, I wouldn't sit here and tell you I want one or the other. That we want one or the other. We want both, and we'll take either one. We just want players that can help us.
Is there a profile of interior defensive lineman that you covet over something else? Like, are you looking for length in there? Are you looking for size? What are the traits that I guess
Yeah,
you're
big, strong, long, tough, physical. That's what you want. You do. I mean, it's the bigger the better, to a degree, but it doesn't have to be height. It can be length. It can be mass. Explosiveness. I mean, there's plenty of defensive linemen that play big and may not be big. So it's really how they play more than the sheer measurables.
You've kind of touched on this a little bit, but just to follow up on it, at 5, right, like you talked about being willing to move and the kind of package, is it kind of in your mind, like, for you to be willing to move there, it needs to be something that blows you away, essentially, that blows the group away for you to be willing to move out of that spot?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it. I mean, you want, when we're sitting, we believe we have the first pick of the draft. I know there's going to be 4 picks that go before us, but we believe that, and the 4 quarterbacks go, we believe strongly that we have the first pick of the draft. So what are teams willing to give us? Now, obviously, we know it's the 5th pick, and people are going to be trading on that, scope. But yeah, it's got to be a good value for us. And does it have to be blown away? What is blown away? I don't know the answer to that, but you're going to weigh the options and the offers that we get, and we'll take the best one if we do move back.
So you're anticipating the first 4 being quarterbacks?
I'm anticipating that, but I'm also anticipating 3 going and a position player going, and us having a quarterback on the board. I think you have to anticipate all scenarios. Could be 2 quarterbacks and 2 quarterbacks fall. The thing if you look at the history of the draft, Aaron Rodgers was considered to be a top 10 pick. Him or Alex Smith won, and he's sitting there in the 20s, So positions fall. It doesn't matter, quarterback or any position. So I think you can look at it from different scenarios. Anticipation, it's probably, I'm not anticipating, I probably misspoke, but you anticipate 4 going, you anticipate 3 going, you anticipate 2 going, so forth. So the draft is the draft. I mean, you think you know what it's going to do, but you really don't until it actually happens. But certainly the feel out there is that there's going to be a lot of quarterbacks go early for good reason. There's a lot of great quarterbacks in this draft.
For your evaluation, where is the drop-off? Like, is it, a lot of times people say after 12 there's a significant drop-off in talent between, the first couple, and then at 20 to 30 is a different one. Like, where do you see the levels?
Yeah, I really don't look at it that as a drop-off. It's good players to be picked in this round, and for example, whoever has the 32nd pick, they have 32 first-round players. They should, and because they may be sitting there at 32 not being able to get out, they have to have 32 players to pick. When we start the first round, we're going to have 32 players to pick, and there is a drop-off in talent, but it's not significant. It's kind of a nice little curve down, and sometimes it flattens out and goes back down and then steps down a little bit. But I know there's 32 players. If I were picking 32, I'd feel comfortable about personally, and I think there's 32 players that we as an organization feel good about in the first round.
At inside linebacker, you guys signed a couple free agents, Denzel and Troy Dye, maybe even come back Dayon. 4 linebackers feels a little bit light, but just where is that position at, and what do you think you might be looking to add at that position?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's a position where we certainly need numbers. I think every position we are short on in terms of a 90-man roster. All right, and you want to create that competition for the 53-man roster. So that's a position that there's players throughout day 2, day 3. I don't know if there's a day 1 inside backer. I don't know that, but there's a day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, or day 6, day 7. I mean, you can just keep going. Yeah. You know, because the moment the draft's over, what are we doing? We're looking at guys on the street in free agency. We're going to sign the undrafted free agents, and then day 5 after the draft, we're going to be looking at free agents where we can fill out the roster. So, guys are on the street right now. So, day 92, whatever day that is, we may be looking to add a D tackle. We got a few more days till the season starts, is my point.
Chad, Joe mentioned like the collaborative process and everything. How does that look for you in the lead up to the draft?
Just a lot of evaluating, just taking a deep dive into the draft, evaluating the top prospects, looking at the top prospects in free agency as well, coming up with lists, coordinating workouts, 30 visits, coordinating for coaches to go to pro days, a lot of stuff, and for those instances where Joe can't be in the room, can't be in the meeting, just trying to really just echo his voice, and deliver the same message. It's a process that we're both really familiar with and, been around it for a long time, my entire career. So just trying to deliver that process and get our scouts and everyone acclimated and up to speed. And they've done an outstanding job. And also just managing and trying to, oversee and overlook the personnel department as a whole. That's pretty much it.
What value do you get out of 30 visits? What are you trying to accomplish with this?
Get to know the player a little better. Sometimes it's personally, sometimes it's in the classroom, sometimes it's medically. There's different reasons you bring a player in for a 30 visit, but it's just spend a little more time around them. Maybe a physical reason, maybe mental. There's many reasons.
And then at center, obviously you guys signed Bradley in free agency. I know Jim mentioned to us at the owners' meetings that Jordan McFadden might have some center flex. Just your assessment of that position.
Yeah, I think that gives us some depth there. If Jordan can do it, and I believe he can. And then we have Hymas, who's played it in games here. So I think we have good depth there right now. And but again, if there's one available and he's the highest player on our board, we'll take him.
And then just with Rashawn Slater, he's extension eligible this offseason. We haven't asked about that. Are you guys working on an extension with him, or is it the type of situation where you guys would like to get a season under your belt with him before you look into that?
I think right now the focus has been on the draft, truthfully, we got a new coaching staff in here, a new general manager, and you kind of just what's important, what's in front of us right now. That was building out the staff, getting ready for free agency and the draft, draft meetings and then free agency, and then now here we are a week away. So that's the focus right now, and then kind of take on the next stages of the season.